I had an experience where everything changed in a heartbeat.
I parked my car on the road to nowhere, not far into the fishing trip. I started to hear a noise. Sometimes the creek coming over the rocks, you can hear like a whisper. But this is not what I heard. I heard children laughing. So I decided to go up, climb the little bank that was there, stuck my head over, nothing. There's nothing there. And I remember looking up, and these two park rangers are coming up from the lake, walking into my campsite. And when I stood up and they saw the buck knife, they both got in a defensive posture. The weird encounter I had up the creek with what I don't know what it was. And then the park rangers come in and tells me to be careful. So I packed my stuff up and got out of there. Now, I'll go back to the first of the story. My goal was to see the cemetery.
My name is Joe Woody. I've been an avid fly fisherman in these Appalachian mountains for the past 25 years.
There it is. Woo! Got it. Oh, he's colored up beautiful.
And in that time, I've not only heard about some interesting stories, but also encountered some unforgettable situations myself.
I don't remember where he went. He was gone. Who am I talking to? First of all, who am I talking to? God?
So come along the journey with me as we dive deeper into these stories of forgotten streams of Appalachia.
We can't put that in there, Josh.
Anybody had just gone through those last few hours by themselves in the wilderness probably wouldn't go into a cemetery at dark out in the wilderness. But that was my goal for being out there, was to go see the cemetery. So I hiked back, it's about a mile, took a left up the trail up the ridgeline, dropped my pack on the picnic tables that they have there, and went back because it was fairly steep hike up to the cemetery. I'd never been there, but it looked fairly steep at the time. So I got back on the trail, took a right, and when I took a right, the frolicking kids sound came back from the ridge line where the cemetery was supposed to be. And I was, at that point, I just picked up my pack, walked out in the dark. You know, I don't want to tell anybody that story. It's crazy. You don't want to sound like a crazy person.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about my philosophy about fishing in this hole. As you can tell, it's a hot day. It's a really hot day. And the fellows that was here before said he saw some fish hitting the top of the water, right up there, where it comes off the white water right there and swirls around, then it comes down here and swirls around. So my first attempt at catching something is tying a little elk hair caddis on top, then dropping off a little Griffith's net on the bottom of that, tie it with a surgeon's knot, and see if I can catch something on top. But quite frankly, that's just me trying to be difficult. I'd love to see something come up on top. I doubt it will, but what I'm going to do when I come down in this bigger hole is tie a big woolly booger on and drift it through there, pull it back and forth. And I'll forego the Griffith's net right now, and I'll just do the little caddis fly. I'm going to fish the hole from left to right around, and I'll fish this top water up through there, over there, and right there to the edge. See what happens. The fishing hole in the quarters, I'm going to fish this left quarter up here, then fish that right quarter over there, then fish this third quarter right here, and then the fourth part of my fishing adventure, I'm going to try a woolly booger in that deep water. Get it down as deep as I can. See how that sun's shining right there on that hole? See if I can drop my fly up high. See that? Let it float down right on it. See that? Now it'd be beautiful if a fish actually hit that right now. Cinematic gold. Nothing yet. Fish might be a little spooked.
I looked up, and I remember I did a Google search. It said mythology, Cherokee voices in the forest, something to that extent. And up popped story after story after story, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. I think it's Nanenahi, which is a very strong reference, especially in Cherokee lore and mythology, and it depends on who you talk to within the tribe. Some of them believe in it strongly. It's not even a question of it not being there. They're there. Other people are, nah, I don't believe in that. You know, it depends on who you talk to. But what it said was that, in the particular passage that I was reading, it said that they're to help people in need, or people to warn away people who might be in danger. And I remember looking at that, and I was like, what? What? This is ridiculous. This is not. You know, I definitely can't tell anybody about this now. But I picked up the phone and called my buddy Ben Bailey.
The trick: go down here and go to the other side of the creek and sneak up, staying low till you get to this side of that big rock.
Yeah.
That helps form the trough.
Yeah.
And just dabble one over into the trough between the foam.
Yeah.
My biggest Rocky Fork trout came out of that trough right there, so I named it the Hog Trough. But it wasn't a brookie, it was about a 14-inch stock rainbow.
Living here most of your life, going back generations, you've had the opportunity to fish not only in East Tennessee, but a large part of the Great Smoky Mountains and all these surrounding areas. And over the time we've known each other, we've started telling each other stories.
True.
Some of them are absolutely true. And one of those stories I shared with you a few months back was my story of my encounter in Forney Creek about some voices I heard. And after I told you that story, there was a moment of silence between us. And between two old fishermen, a moment of silence generally means, boy, have I got something to tell you. When I told you this story, you were the second person I had told, because I was very hesitant to let that be known of what I experienced. So when you told me what happened to you, it gave me a sense of, whew, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. Right. You know, I hadn't known you all that long when you originally told me.
It's a very personal story, isn't it? It's something that.
Well, you know that if you, depending on who you tell it to, you're either going to be received with a big dose of skepticism, or it's going to be somebody who can relate in some way or takes you seriously. I'll throw something out there like, well, I had something really strange happen to me up where Bone Valley Creek comes into Hazel Creek on a backpacking / fishing photographing trip one time. On the last day that we were there, unbeknownst to us, there was an event taking place. One of the traditions for the Bone Valley Baptist Church there on Hazel Creek was family members would come in a few days before Decoration Day, and they would clear every blade of grass, and then they would create mounds at each gravesite about 4 inches high and 4 inches across between the headstone and the footstone. Mm-hmm. And then on Decoration Day, that's where they placed the flowers. And then on Sunday, when they had the actual ceremony, and all the people were kind of ferried in little side-by-side vehicles and four-wheel vehicles up to the top of the ridge to the cemetery. That evening, after everybody had left the valley, we were the only 4 people in the Hazel Creek Valley. We knew that. Most people left on Sunday to catch the ferry back across the lake, and so we knew we were the only ones still there. We decided to go back up and check it out. So my then girlfriend and I were standing at the upper end of the cemetery. It was kind of on a slope, and this cemetery was probably a quarter acre in size, I'll say. And we were at the upper end of this sloped cemetery plot, and my brother and his girlfriend were at the lower end, and we were just looking at the graves and reading the tombstones that still had, inscriptions on them, and checking it out, photographing. And while we were at the upper end, all of a sudden I heard laughter. and it was the unmistakable laughter of children. There's fish in here. But sometimes, you know, the fish need to win. And I think this is one of those times. You know what I'm going to blame it on? I'm going to blame it on this bamboo rod. Yeah. Bamboo is slow. I usually fish graphite. I brought out the vintage stuff today because I thought it'd be kind of cool. I wanted to show you my bamboo rod. But your reaction time has to be 50 times faster with a slow bamboo rod than it does a graphite rod, which is what I usually fish with. How's that for an excuse? So we heard children laughing and kind of singing. It sounded exactly like if you were maybe 100 yards away from a school playground, is what it sounded like.
Oh,
and I looked at my friend, she looked at me and I said, "You hear that?" And she said, "Yeah, I was just about to ask if you heard that." I looked down at the other end of the cemetery at my brother, and he and his girlfriend were both kind of frozen and doing the same thing, kind of looking at each other and listening. And I said, "Hey, are you guys hearing that?" And both of them just kind of nodded. And then within half a minute to a minute, it sounded like they shifted from that direction, which was south of the cemetery, around to east of the cemetery where Bone Valley Creek was, the Bone Valley itself. And that was really strange. It's like they just shifted with the wind. I know that sounds kind of woo, but that's how it was. Went back down the ridge. Campsite was right near where the old church was. That's the Bone Valley campsite. Getting the fire going, making supper, and we're sitting around. Nobody had mentioned what had happened in the cemetery. And we're sitting around eating our wonderful freeze-dried meals and just kind of BSing and talking. And I think we all were wondering who was going to bring it up first. Yeah. And my brother actually said, "Well, what do y'all think that was up there?" The spiritual side of me thinks that it was the spirits of the kids that are buried in that cemetery, and fully 20-25% of the graves up there were children, and that they were ecstatic that their descendants had come to pay tribute through the decoration day.
They were celebrating.
They were celebrating. These spirits were happy, and they were celebrating that their descendants had come to pay homage and tribute to them. And like you, I haven't told very many people about that episode, but I did tell a Cherokee woman right after she gave a presentation at a Cherokee Heritage Festival over in Elizabethton a few years ago. And she just kind of grinned and had this look of knowing on her face as I was telling the story. She was just kind of grinning, and you could see in her eyes, it was like, yeah, that's real. You know, that's the real thing. We've experienced that many times, you know, on the reservation. And she said, but it's quite an honor for a non-Cherokee to have that kind of experience. And so, to be honest, I've been kind of torn between the two versions, if it was spirits of the children that were buried in that cemetery, or if it was maybe what the Cherokee call the little people. The most famous brook trout guide and fisherman of these parts, he's not with us anymore, a guy named Todd Burleson from up in Roan Mountain. You know what he fished? Size 8s and 10s.
That's huge.
And he always swore that brook trout were so opportunistic, when they saw a big bushy fly, size 8 or 10, they couldn't resist it. My reason for fishing larger flies, which I usually fish a 10 or a 12 myself, I'm fishing a 12 today, is because I can't see them anymore.
Exactly my thing, man.
Here's my net, Joe. Maybe drop it down there and see if he'll swim into it.
You got a line on it? While I was trying to decide how to get to the bottom of this mystery, if that's what you want to call it, or whatever it is, I had an acquaintance I know that I met that I trusted, and I called him up. He's part of the nations, and I told him the story. And his first, he goes, you know, I hadn't even finished the story, and he goes, "So you had an encounter with the little people, huh?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what the sound was and what was going on out there." And he goes, "Listen, I don't buy into most of that stuff. A lot of people that I do know," he said, "let me put you in touch with a storyteller who's very knowledgeable about Cherokee folklore, mythology, or history, however which way you want to put it. I don't want to put any doubts on any form of what people believe. I just want to figure out what happened."
We are going to Cherokee, North Carolina, specifically on the Cherokee Indian Reservation. And we have been given the honor of talking to Kathy Littlejohn, a Cherokee storyteller who has many, many talks on YouTube, nationally renowned, if not world renowned. She is going to give us some information on the little people. We have to be very, very careful in what we talk about. She is honoring us by talking to us about it, and just ask some questions and just get some background on what her thoughts on my experience on Forney Creek in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Storytelling is so tied in to everything. So I've been lucky enough to be invited to the Smithsonian and to Colonial Williamsburg. It just became a passion of mine, and I collect as many stories as I can because a lot of them are not written down. So if I don't record them and keep them and pass them on in some form or another, I'm afraid that we'll lose them. I'm sometimes surprised at how many we've kept, despite all of the obstacles and the barriers.
All those things coming together at once. One thing's okay, two things are coincidence, 3, 4, 5 things.
That's not a coincidence.
It's not a coincidence.
No.
It's not a coincidence.
No.
Something spiritual,
Yeah.
weird, surreal happened to me. Yeah, if you can just tell me a few things about.
Sure. In English, we call them little people, and they are the protectors in the woods. What happened to you was the only way they had to get you to leave. Something was going to happen. It's rare for you to see physical evidence because they're beyond fast. So they deliberately left that footprint, I believe, for you. Now this book, it's called Cherokee Little People Were Real. At Western Carolina University, they dug up a mound in order to place a building there. They interviewed the workers, the heavy equipment operators, the construction workers. He said on the campus, they dug a trench. This is before they tore the mound down. And while they were digging, they ran into a lot of those little tunnels. How big were they? About 24 inches. So they explored these tunnels. Someone found what they thought was the skull of a child. And I don't know if the professor found it or it was given to him, but it was on his desk for years. And one day, this woman, maybe an anthropologist, walked by and she said, "You know, that's the first child skull I've ever seen with a full set of teeth and wisdom teeth."
Look at that fish. Well, we can catch that one. There we go. So they're hitting in here. So it's just a question of them getting used to what the bait is. Looks like a typical stocked. It's a typical stock brook trout. I don't want to fight him too much in this weather. Get him back in there so we don't hurt him. There we go. Yeah, he's good.
And that was my Hazel Creek experience. And you don't fish in these mountains alone without coming across things you can't explain. If you ever talk to a Cherokee person about this, you find out real quick they take it seriously.
It's very serious,
yeah. It's deeply woven into their heritage and history, and they don't look at that as legend or lore.
No.
They look at that as true history and a true heritage. And
there could be 1,000 explanations for what we experience, but to me personally, and I think to you personally too, there was something there that I could not explain. I could not do it. I was honored with this experience. Is it life-changing? Do you look at, I look at things differently now. You know what Kathy Littlejohn told me? It was almost right from the beginning of the interview. She looked at me and goes,
Number one, you're not crazy. I'm sure you thought I'm going crazy, or when I tell people about this, they're gonna think I'm crazy. No.
I needed to hear that. I needed to hear it. If you've spent time in our mountains and you're open to it, you come to the realization there is some type of magic, some type of spirit alive and well. You know, you talk to some people who've spent days, weeks, months in the Smokies. They've never even seen a wild animal. Why? They're everywhere. I truly believe that if you slow down, get back, get your mountain ears, stay quiet, the sounds, the bird chirping becomes louder. You hear the wind blowing through the trees. You hear little rustles in the leaves. You start to be more in touch with your surroundings. I'm not saying you're gonna have an experience with little people. I'm not saying that. But the chances of you having an encounter that's memorable, that you say, hey, I was in Eagle Creek and I had this bear encounter, or a deer walked right up to my camera. If you have an open mind and you're in tune with what's going around you in the wilderness, that's when those things happen to you.